Hello and welcome to Cracking Culture Change. My name is Andy and today we're going to explore the benefits of helping neurodiverse people arrive and thrive within organisations. My guest today is Tom Cliffe, founder of Track, which is a social enterprise that specialises on enabling neurodiverse people to fulfil their potential. I was keen to talk to Tom to learn about what it's like for neurodiverse people to enter the workplace, as well as the benefits for having a more diverse culture. And I also wanted to have a better understanding of what organisations can practically do to create an inclusive climate. I hope you enjoy this episode and I will catch up with my reflections at the end. Hello, I'm Andy Loveless and welcome to Cracking Culture Change, the podcast where you'll learn real life stories to help you crack your culture. And the subject for today's conversation is around the benefits of helping neurodiverse people arrive and thrive in organisations. And I'm delighted to be joined by Tom Cliffe from Track. Tom, hello and welcome.
Hi, thanks very much for having me on.
It's a pleasure. Thank you very much. And I thought it might be good just to kick off if you just tell a little bit about yourself and how Track came into being.
So yeah, I went to university, as you do after school, in a sort of traditional career path and did a business degree. Coming out of university, I found my real passion was people. My mum and dad were both teachers, so I found myself going down the family path of going into education. And education and learning, something which I'm really passionate about. But I guess during my time there, I saw lots of constraints and you know, the judgments we make on people based on you're successful if you get a C or a grade 4 in a qualification. And that didn't really sit well with me. And I started to work with more on the pastoral side of things, so looking after students' well-being, and actually found out that, you know, I got to work with a tremendous group of people, all of whom had different backgrounds, but I could see huge potential in supporting them to develop their skills. And I then started to work with autistic young adults, and again, saw barriers they face to employment that I thought we could remove. So rather than keep doing the same thing again and expecting things to change, I set up a social enterprise back now in 2018 called Track, with two main sides to it. One was about supporting employers, and then we opened up a cafe in Northampton as well, which was about giving people the opportunity to develop their skills in a supportive environment. And we realised what we could then do was match the two together, find people with skills and then put them into employment where they were the right kind of person for the job. And actually everyone benefits. I take great joy in seeing people move into careers and jobs that give them all the benefits that come with that, but also seeing the businesses benefit from highly sort of talented individuals. So I guess in a snapshot, that's how we came into existence.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Tom. So let's just start with a sort of big picture to kick this conversation off. How would you describe the employment landscape for neurodiverse people in the UK at the moment? What's the journey we're on? Where are we at? Is it getting better, worse? How would you describe it?
So I think when we're talking about autism, neurodiversity, we have to remember it's a different picture for every person. If we're looking at sort of general landscapes, you know, there's a variety of published figures, but you're looking at only a fifth of autistic adults being in employment, and that figure can vary depending on that. But, you know, let's not get too dragged down into statistics. What we're looking at here is there are people that want to work that are struggling to access employment because there are barriers there. And that for us is where our key driver comes from, because previously people have spent a lot of money training people to fit into a culture. We train people how to pass interviews. You know, we almost tell them what to say because this is what a good interview looks like. Actually, is that a person being their true selves? Probably not. They're saying what they think the interviewer wants to hear. And we then look and work with companies to say, well, actually, look, you know, do we really need an interview for this particular role? Would we not be better off allowing people to kind of develop their skills in a different way and demonstrate what they're capable of? And I think what we're seeing is, you know, my LinkedIn is full of lots of great kind of pockets of work going on, either locally or some starting to build nationally, where organisations like ourselves are supporting the businesses and the individuals, because I think that's where there's a key. You know, it's all very well providing training to an employer, but actually we then need the people to move into those roles. And likewise, it's all very well supporting an individual, but if we can't find a business that's willing to make some adjustments, then we're going to struggle. And I think that's where we're starting to see now the conversations happening, which weren't there. We have to look, neurodiversity as a term is relatively new in sort of mainstream conversation, let's say. For myself, I've been talking about this for a long time, but actually what we're starting to see now is we're seeing success stories from people who've gone in and actually when you look, some of the major inventors, the major entrepreneurs over the last decades, some have actually come out in their words and said, I am autistic or I'm dyslexic. And that gives a real sort of kickstart for people to get involved, because this is a subject, as you know, Andy, I could talk about for hours and we've not got that long. But, it's one where you have to have those starter conversations and get rid of some stereotypes and myths that are out there, which are kind of promoted quite a lot, but aren't true. And once you start to work with individuals, you see the talents they bring, the skills they bring. And I think that mindset change is where we are at the moment. And what we need to keep doing now is not just allow that to become a conversation. We need to see action with it. So that's where we sort of pride ourselves with the number of people that we've got into employment as a small social enterprise based in the Midlands. We're now having an impact regionally and sort of nationally. But these are the key things we want to see. Conversations are great, but actually what we want to see is that transfer into action and, people being in the workplace, being able to be themselves. And I guess that's what we all want to achieve, really.
So you mentioned there some of the myths that are out there about this subject, Tom. Just tell us a bit more what you mean by that.
So again, I think there's some very big misconceptions. We work with a company, first of all, where somebody in quite a senior position thought he grew out of autism. Now, that'll be shocking to people that are aware of the area, but actually it highlighted the level of which we need to start, because actually, there's sort of misconceptions that all autistic people are just good at IT. And there's a problem there, because you use the word all straight away, and that doesn't summarize a human being. You've met one human being. And actually, we need to sort of counter some of those things. People will say, autistic people don't like communicating. Well, I work with some people who are fantastic communication skills verbally, but might struggle written. And we need to break down these huge headings that we give to people and start to focus more on that individual person. So, for some people that I work with, they really like structure. Now, work gives you structure. It tells you when to arrive, what to do, how to do it. I also work with other people who prefer to work more in a freelance sort of method, because it enables them to work to their strengths. But some of these sweeping statements that come out, and unfortunately, stories in the media will sometimes focus on quite negative stories, actually. And what we want to do is change that narrative. And, we want to represent the people that we're working with. We've worked with hundreds of different people now. They've all got different skills. They've all got different backgrounds, and they've all got different stories, which some of them want to share and some don't. And we respect that. But I think, there's some sweeping statements that are made about communication, about change, about, they won't be good in this role. Well, how do you know? We might have exactly the person that's right for that role. And that's what it's all about for us. We're passionate about talking neurodiversity, autism, dyslexia, dyspraxia. But actually, our key focus is always the name of the person that we're working with and finding the right fit for them.
And I guess, like all of us, the whole lockdown, hybrid working, all this change applies equally here. Some people will see that as a real positive. Other people want the structure of being in the office or that connection. Is that the case?
Absolutely. And I think, we throw back to sort of January 2020 when I'd supported someone into an employment kind of placement and said to the employer, look, they're going to work best if there was a sort of hybrid role, 3 days at home, 2 days in the office, and maybe rotate across weeks. And the employer had said, no, that's not possible. They need to be in the office. We need to be here. Then, of course, come March, I'm getting a phone call to say, right, we've had to swap to this. And actually, what we saw was when they were at home, the productivity was high. For me, most importantly, their well-being was higher in using their terminology. They used various different methods to look at that. But you could see they weren't having the stresses of maybe the bus journey to work, or there's lots of uncertainties on that. What if the bus driver asked me a question I don't know the answer to? Somebody might really struggle with that. So we then had people where they're then going, right, we want everyone back in the office. Well, why? Actually, this person is working productively. You can see from various statistical methods that their output is higher. but also their well-being was higher, and their view was, well, they need to come back in to feel part of the team. And actually, that individual was quite happy with their role of the team, being quite isolated. But you had to listen to them. You had to ask. The flip side of that as well, you've got an issue because you're talking about working from home. They're two very different areas if you interpret things quite literally. And actually, how do you switch between work mode and home mode when actually you're sat, I'm working at home today. This is my office. So technically still my home, but actually I'm working from here as well. And I think the key bit here is listening to people and not basing assumptions based on our own preferences. I'm quite social. I quite enjoy going out and working with lots of different people. I love conversations. I love talking, as you can see. But actually, what about for the people for whom, they are more productive and they want to do this? And when people say, I am happy working here, actually believe in them and trusting in them. Because if we don't do that, I mean, one of the things we looked at with remote working was about people insisting you had your cameras on for meetings. Well, I don't know about you, but it's bizarre looking at yourself. It's not comfortable as a human being. I don't find it comfortable. Now, some people I work with, the thought of that, they couldn't access that work. Well, we can make that easy by just turning your camera off.
Yeah.
And you might get an employer saying, oh, but I can't see them. Well, if you don't trust your employee enough that much, there's probably deeper seated issues than, having a camera on or off. But I think, again, it comes down to meeting the needs of the individuals within our teams and actually respecting that people will approach things in different ways. So, for some people it's been fantastic, and for other people it's been awful. And I think you could probably represent that across different groups and find different opinions. But that key thing for me throughout all of it is listening to people and respecting their personal opinions.
Brilliant. I'm going to ask you at the end, Tom, if you've got any. Just seeding it now so you can start thinking about it. If you've got any number one tip or advice for anybody who's thinking about engaging more in this area, employing more neurodiverse people, etc. So just to flag that, you've talked about listening quite a lot already and keeping it real in terms of it's an individual. We're all different. But anyway, I'll come on to that later on. I want to just understand a bit more about some of the clients you're working with. You don't need to name names, but what's triggering those people to work with you and with this topic? And what do you think is getting in the way of other organizations? What are the barriers and what are the drivers that make people go in this direction?
So I think there's again a complete spectrum of examples. So from one individual we worked with, the major barrier to employment was almost at the interview stage, where when we first used to meet people, you shook hands. Now, for this particular individual, they said, when I shake hands, it feels like, my arm's on fire. It's causing physical pain. People are then asking me questions. I can't process the information. So when we worked with the employer, we'd said, look, when you meet them, just don't shake hands. That's the only change we want.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the barriers that we face. People assume this is going to have to be a huge mindset change, a huge physical change. It's going to cost lots of money. Now, actually, I can give you business cases for that all day long to suggest that's not the truth. But that first part of it is engaging, because the biggest barrier we have is, I think personally, people are anxious whenever someone mentions inclusion, diversity, disability, autism, any of these terminologies that you use. They're worried about getting things wrong, so they don't say anything. And what we've actually found is we've pushed this up people's agendas, because obviously there's lots of different areas that people will look at. And we've gone to companies and said, look, here's what we offer. Here's what we think we can benefit from you. And not being afraid to say, don't do this because it's a nice thing to do. Do this because you're going to get better staff. There's lots of business benefits that come from this. And deep down, my personal enjoyment is getting people into work. It changes their lives. It makes a massive difference. So I think you look there from people who have come out of university degrees. In universities, people might have a first-class degree in accountancy. Now, we work with somebody who the barrier to employment was that they'd never seen an office, and nobody had ever thought to show them the different sorts of offices you get. Now, you might think, well, an accountant's office is going to be the same. They're not. Every office is different. Now, this person's barrier was they didn't know the environment in which they wanted to work. So when they came to meet us, we said, look, have you ever been to a workplace? And they said, no one's ever asked us that before, because they're just almost going, you just say no when we ask you, do you want to work? And it's looking at it from a different perspective and saying, okay, so here's quite a traditional office. here's a more modern office, and here's a remote sort of virtual office. Which of those do you prefer? I prefer the traditional. Okay, so locally we've got these companies, we'll introduce you, and then they get into work and they're fantastic at their job. But there's lots of assumptions that are made. If you've got a first class degree in accountancy, you should be able to fill out an interview form, you should be an application form, an interview, all of these things. Interviews, I think our success comes from working with businesses and the individuals, because actually, you can pick any fast food restaurant. I won't mention the particular one we work with, but as a 16-year-old school leaver, if you're asked, why do you want to work here? There's two sets of answers there. One is, I want to be paid and I want free food, which is the person telling you the truth, which might be an answer which an autistic individual I work with gave. And then the second set of answers is, I've always dreamt of being a problem solver, working in a teamwork, all of these words that we're taught to tell young people. That person's effectively, lying's probably quite a strong word, but they're not fully telling the truth. And, actually that mindset though, the first time someone comes to you and says, why do you want to work here? Well, I want money and I want, the benefits that come with it. It can be different, but actually what we want to do is raise that consciousness that when someone gives us an answer or doesn't follow an instruction quite the way we intended, rather than blaming yourself or blaming the other person, just think, right, how can we reword this? And what you then find is that will probably help lots of people. So, we've supported people into logistics and hospitality, but you look at logistics, if you look from an outside, you see these huge warehouses on the outskirts of town. The M1 corridor near us is kind of, there's lots and lots there. But when you get inside, they're actually very different. Now, some areas, they look huge, but you might be working in a very small area of it, and actually supporting the individual by showing them that helps, because there's far less people than there would be working in a supermarket. It's far more structured. There's far more routine. So for some people, that is going to be the right environment. For other people, there might be some sensory things around it. But actually, what you will find, and what we have seen over and over again, is once we've placed people into businesses, they've seen the benefits and they've gone, well, actually, look, we've changed this and this has helped 3 or 4 other people in our workplace, or we've set up a buddy system and actually they're now enjoying their job much more because they're learning so much. And actually, we've changed our processes because someone said, well, it'd be quicker if you did it this way, because they just look for things from a different perspective. And I could give you examples all day across a variety of sectors, but when it comes to it, when we're talking about some of the main barriers, I think to start with are, awareness is a beginning. It's starting that conversation. It's not being afraid to say, right, okay, we don't have the knowledge that we need. What can we do to make things better? And also, one of the barriers we came across quite early on was, we employed someone a few years ago and that didn't work out. Yeah. But actually, you've not put the things in place proactively. Some people we work with, they might go in 5 minutes earlier. They have their own workstation, and again, one of the questions that we always start sort of training with is people say, oh, in our workplace, there isn't a hidden culture or there aren't any unwritten rules. So I'll say, right, so how quickly is it from when I start working here that I can criticize you? And okay. No one will give you an answer. Okay, no one will be able to say it's a day, it's a week, it's a month, because these are the things which aren't there. Now, for someone who, we almost pick up on social cues around us. What about the person who doesn't and actually goes in on the first day and says, I think you'd be much better doing it this way. Now, they might be perceived as rude, arrogant, all of these different things. They're not. They're just sharing an opinion, which actually, when you listen to it, probably will be right. I'm not saying it will be every time. We've had, things that we've changed that haven't worked, but that mindset change of actually, from an employer's point of view, it's so refreshing when you see companies that are kind of willing to say, you know what, we've got a recruitment issue here, so we're going to think differently. We're going to have different shift patterns. We're going to employ different areas of groups. For people for whom maybe 10, 12, 16 hours a week is absolute maximum for them, well, let's put those facilities in place for them. So that flexibility from the employer can make such a difference.
And I'd love to, in a few minutes, explore the benefits a bit more and hear some more of those great stories. But it sounds like in a lot of cases that actually the adjustments are really, it's not big things. It's not complicated, but it is, the small things make a big difference. But you have to start with that awareness. And it sounds like that curiosity, openness, from an employer point of view, I'm thinking, And how do you help with that? You run workshops, do you run seminars, how do you help them with that journey?
So one of the things that we've recognised is we run a monthly sort of introductory session for people to sign up, which is fully funded, so it takes away any sort of cost implications, because there's lots of different pressures from different things. We need to do this and that, but also that is fully funded. It's not a free piece of training because our time is valuable and we know we can make an impact. But what we do there is run these sessions which are designed to get people thinking. We don't have all the answers, and that's, I'm not a salesperson. Actually, I'm not here to sell you a product. It's actually getting those conversations started and going, right, within our company, look, here's some things we can change very, very quickly. Here's some things that we can work with. And what we want to do is work in partnerships, because actually when companies come to us, very quickly it becomes clear as to whether they're interested in developing this longer term or whether it's a short term training piece. Because I could come in tomorrow and deliver training to 1,000 staff. The impact of that, probably not huge, but it's going to start conversations. The real value that we've seen is when we've done that with senior leadership teams and gone, okay, within our company, here's an area where we can run with this. We've got people passionate about it. We've got people maybe personal experiences. And we then look, right, we'll come in and actually look around your workplace. We're not going to suggest things which aren't applicable to you. So what might work in an office is going to be very different to a warehouse, is very different to a factory. And actually looking at, right, within your environment, here's the things. Now, I love the question why. Why is the best word in the English dictionary. If you can justify why something's happening, it's probably quite a good thing to do. If you can't, there's an opportunity to change. If your answer is because we've always done it that way, I think you'll probably have heard this hundreds of times on this. It's just going wrong. It's not efficient 2 years ago, let alone 20. It's looking at how we make those changes. And from there, it's then actually being realistic and looking. You will have existing staff. The statistics of sort of between 1 in 50 and 1 in 70 people being diagnosed as autistic in the UK. So if you're employing those people, statistically, there's those figures there. So it's not just new staff, it's your existing staff and how we support them. So for me, it's that reaching out and getting involved in these sessions. We run them every month. We have companies from all over the world now sort of joining them. Some will then go, okay, that's good. That's just what I needed to hear for now. I'll come back to you. Others will look and go, right, we'd like to come in, audit the workplace. And then looking at, for me, you need senior leadership buy-in. As with anything, I think cultural, if it's one person's crusade, it's not going to work as a sense. It's got to be an area where there is a commitment there. And what we then look at is all areas of that. Because if there's somebody working next to you at a colleague level, maybe even an entry-level junior job, you need to be aware how to support them. And all of our training starts with a message of, don't sit there thinking, I can't do this because I'm not the CEO. Every single one of us can make a difference every day. And that can be the way we communicate. That could be the way we react to someone's behaviors or emotions being displayed. We, as every employee, can make a difference to that. And that, for me, is so important, because you'll get people go, oh, we haven't got a budget for this. You don't need a budget. You don't need a budget to think about your next sentence or to try and reword an instructions because it's not been clear. You don't need a budget to change your interview questions from tell me about yourself, which you could get a 10, 12-hour answer to. Tell me about yourself and give me 2 examples of skills which you have which are relevant to this job. You don't need a budget to get rid of excellent communication skills, which is on every job advert ever. And nobody can explain to me what it means. So for somebody who, I know people who I've worked with that won't apply for jobs because they'll go, I haven't got excellent communication skills.
Right.
And that you're missing out on candidates with wording. Yet you go and do the jobs. We've gone into places and I've gone, well, your job advert says I'll do this, and I've just done a day in this job and I've not done any of that. This is what I've done.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Excellent communication skills to me might mean multilingual, might mean I can present to 1,000 people.
Yeah.
It says it on jobs that you don't even need to verbally communicate with.
It's so true.
And they're there. Why? Because they've always been there. And sometimes, what we don't want to do with this is ruin people's culture. We work with some brands with incredibly strong brand images and cultures and things that we don't want to do. We don't want to disband things that work. But actually, as you made, it's such small changes. And again, not expensive, not huge, not altering. And you know what? They will help other people as well. Preparing a video guide to your premises will help everyone come in. Because if you've got an interview somewhere, if you're like me, you'll go on Google Maps the night before. You might even do a drive-through just to see where I'm going the day before. But think about the things once you get in. Which buzzer do I press? Where do I park? Who am I going to be greeted by? That could help everybody. And again, that could be done on a mobile phone by somebody in half an hour. It doesn't need to be a professionally produced. I mean, there are some great companies out there that do that. But, it's changing that mindset and also that belief that we've all got the power to influence, as opposed to, well, I've been told by a manager I've got to do this. No, it's not about that. It's what can you do each and every day.
Brilliant. Amazingly, Tom, we're nearly at the end of this conversation. I can't believe it's gone so quickly. You've talked, I think, about the benefits, some of the benefits. Is there any others you'd like to add, or any more you'd like to add into that pot in terms of the?
I guess I think with that, because it's so personalised. We've got the person who's gone into maybe, let's say, a cybersecurity role, that actually their attention to detail has been a real benefit, and there was an assumption that work was boring and repetitive. Well, actually, the person liked that, and that's a change of mindset. So they're bringing the benefits here. And actually, for me, one of the key themes is around the different perspective. You've got multinational companies. Microsoft have their own recruitment streams for autistic adults in the US. They think differently because they want people who look at things in a different way. And actually, that can be key, from developing a new product to the way in which we pick and pack something to the way in which we craft an email. And actually, one of these, the benefits to business, I don't want to say things like, attendance and all of these things, because I think that demeans the skills of people that we're getting in. There are benefits to retaining staff and having to keep recruiting. And actually, one thing we have seen for people is if they find an environment where they're happy and they're given the opportunities to progress, because this is key, because there's another barrier there that isn't yet being talked about, because we haven't quite caught that up. We've got a lot of people that are in jobs where their skills could be used much higher up or in different roles. And that's another challenge for us moving forward, which I think it is with lots of different groups, and we'll talk about kind of how we support people with that. But I think from the point of view of enjoyment from staff, and by enjoyment, I don't mean someone coming in saying they're having the best time ever. I mean someone who's happy in their work and getting on with it. Because one of the things that someone said to me early on was, this person isn't very positive. I said, what do you mean by positive? I said, are they good at their job? Oh, they're brilliant at their job. Well, that's all that really matters. Just because you don't think they're positive doesn't mean they're not contributing a huge amount to your business. We should be happy in work. Think about it literally. Why should we be happy in work? It's a mindset change. But when you get there and start to think about it, actually, what do people want? And when they're doing their jobs properly, and you ask them, is everything okay with this? And rather than going, how can we help? Maybe going, right, there's two ways in which we could deal with the situation. Either this way where I will deal with it to support you, or this way in which you can do it yourself. Just those slight changes of language that we use can have a massive difference. And the benefits to businesses, the people that we're placing now, these companies are seeing the benefits day in, day out. And I guess they'll probably be the best sort of advocates for us to say that. But, I think as well, not being afraid to say there is a real business case behind it. I think some people worry about saying that. But I'm not taking advantage of anyone. I'm placing the right people in the right jobs that then go on to thrive. And surely that's got to be a benefit to society as a whole from our point of view. And I think start those conversations, get involved. Don't be afraid to ask difficult questions. And also don't be afraid of the answers. Because I guess as a sort of point that I make to a lot of people at the end of training, when people ask for feedback, do you really mean that? Or do you want praise? Because we'll say, how do you think this went? And what we really mean is tell us how good we've been. Now, if you ask somebody and they answer literally, we know, Tom, actually you talk too much. Your voice at times goes a little bit up and down. Okay, that's fine. So here's don't take it personally. Look at it as genuinely an opportunity to learn, rather than, we ask people for feedback and then are offended when we get told things that we don't want to hear. And again, once you can change that mindset, it's so refreshing. And that's where sort of change really happens.
Lovely. So our final question, Tom, you've talked about mindset there quite a lot through this conversation and just sort of finished on that. I know this is a tough question. Is there one practical piece of advice or top tip you'd give to anyone listening to this that's thinking about going in this direction, what would you?
So, yeah, to summarise into one, I'm really going to struggle with.
It's a
But you
tough
said
one.
one. It's a really tough one because again, I think there's this, the key message would be change the environment, not the person, and I think that summarises a lot of what we do. That we've got to stop looking at training people to fit into things that they don't need to fit into. When
Change
we can
the environment, not the person.
Yeah, and we can really look at that. The interview. Rather than training people how to answer questions that we don't really need answering anyway, let's change the interview process. Rather than saying, if someone says to you, look, I'm finding it difficult to work in here because it's too bright, there's a practical thing. Rather than going, oh, no, you're wrong, get on with it, we can either put blinds up or we can move the desk away from the bright lights and change the environment. It's almost that mindset thing again of rather than assuming someone's not doing something because they're lazy. If someone says no, there might be a real reason behind why they can't do that, and you focus on what they can do rather than what they can't. And I think the starting point for all of that is start the conversations, get involved. We offer it. There are other organisations that offer it as well. But if you're starting that conversation, you're already starting to change that environment because you're thinking differently. So I guess that would be a key message from me. Yeah, absolutely.
Lovely. Change the environment, not the person. It's the message. One-liner. Tom, we're done. We've run out of time, but thank you so much for your time. I've learned loads. It's been brilliant hearing you talk and your passion and clarity coming through. Thank you very much.
No, thank you for having me on.
You're welcome. Cheers. What a fascinating episode. To me, that was a glimpse into a world that most of us don't go or have never been. And I love Tom's passion about this and about the fact that every one of us can make a difference every single day. You don't need a budget to make any number of small changes that will make a big difference. Thinking through the people culture with fresh eyes, just because we've done it that way doesn't mean to say we have to always do it that way. And I love that openness about don't be afraid to ask questions and don't be afraid of the answers. So feedback as an opportunity to learn was really strong through this. And then the other top tip, which I loved, which I took away from Tom, was change the environment, not the person. If you'd like to crack your culture, please get in touch with us at www.pecanpartnership.co.uk. And don't forget to subscribe and share this episode with anyone you think might be interested in hearing it. Thank you.